colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues. Excellent. So I think we can all now start to settle and start the session. My name is Cecilia Aipira. I head the Disasters and Conflicts branch in the Ecosystem Division of UNEP. I will be your moderator this afternoon. So I think we are starting more or less on time. And we already have our distinguished speakers, panelists here, so we start. So, good afternoon, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends. Welcome to this UNEA 7-side event, which is called Advancing Nature-Based Solutions for Peace, Insights from the EU-UNEP Partnership on Climate Change, Environment, Peace and Security. It's my pleasure to moderate this session this afternoon. And as we gather here today, we do so at a moment when climate crisis is becoming a risk multiplier, shaping peace, security, and human well-being across the globe. I think we are all seeing how climate impacts are intensifying resource scarcity, they're deepening inequalities, and fueling displacement, and also placing pressure on already fragile governance structures. In many regions, environmental degradation is interacting with existing social, political, and economic vulnerabilities in ways that heighten the potential of instability. Yet, while these risks are global, the solutions are actually rooted in the local realities, in the knowledge, the leadership, and resilience of local stakeholders, in particular, local communities who live at the front line of climate change. Around the world, we are seeing growing recognition that nature-based solutions can help the gap or bridge the gap between environment action, climate adaptation, and peace building. When designed well, nature-based solutions can restore degraded ecosystems, strengthen sustainable livelihoods, but also reduce pressure that fuel conflict and build social cohesion. So this event this afternoon brings together government representatives. We also have practitioners from different parts of the world to share their reflections, insights, lessons on designing, implementing, and scaling peace-oriented nature-based solutions. They will highlight integrated strategies that combine ecosystem restoration, climate adaptation, conflict prevention, peace building to maximize co-benefits, while also exploring how local and transboundary experiences can inform policy at national, regional, and global levels to advance effective climate, environment, peace and security approaches. This session will also explore how countries can integrate conflict-sensitive, peace-oriented nature-based solutions into national, regional, and international policy processes and frameworks. We are very fortunate today to have with us four distinguished panelists who will bring perspectives from Mexico, Somalia, Libya, and Nepal. But we are also very lucky to have our distinguished ambassador from the EU with us also this afternoon. Their experiences will help us reflect on what works, what needs to change, what doesn't work, and what partnerships are required to scale up these solutions. But before we start with our panel, I would like to invite UNEP's Deputy Director, Doreen Robinson, who is a Deputy Director for Ecosystem Division, for her welcoming remarks. Doreen.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to the ambassador, to the panelists. Warm, I think, is the key word. I think some of you thought Inger was going to be delivering this, and you got me instead. I will try to keep it lively and concise because I'm here to hear and learn with you all today. So Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, thank you for the opportunity to speak on a topic that's central to the way that we address today's interconnected crises of climate change, environmental degradation, and conflict, nature-based solutions. At a time when climate impacts, we just heard this, are intensifying, biodiversity is declining at unprecedented rates, and pollution is driving health and economic losses, we must remind ourselves of a simple truth. Nature is not only the victim of conflict, it is also our greatest tool for preventing and resolving it. Across the world, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are driving insecurity, displacement, and competition over dwindling natural resources. And the regions most acutely affected by environmental degradation are overwhelmingly the same regions facing fragility, instability, and conflict. The numbers make this clear. Approximately or slightly more than 1/3 of GEF-funded projects are implemented in conflict settings, and over 88% in fragile contexts. This is not a coincidence. It reflects the reality that conflict and environmental stresses reinforce another. As the UNEP Resolution 5.5 underscores, nature-based solutions are actions that address social, economic, and environmental challenges while delivering resilience and biodiversity nature benefits. This is exactly why they are so critical, because they simultaneously address the pressures that often drive conflict. And I've said them, and I guess I'll say them again: biodiversity loss, climate, food insecurity, livelihood decline, inequality, and also unemployment. Well-designed NBS restore ecosystems, they improve those livelihoods, they strengthen social cohesion, and they build resilient economies. Conflicts are frequently rooted in struggles over natural resources: land, water, forests, grazing routes, minerals, and many others. NBS helps to mediate these tensions by improving governance, access, and sustainable use of shared resources. In Cambodia's Cardamom Mountains, a GEF-supported conservation project reduced local conflict by involving communities directly in the management of their natural resources. Through community stewardship agreements, village development plans that were co-created, and microfinance incentives for wildlife monitoring and forest protection, the project aligned community needs with conservation goals. The results were stronger local governance, improved economies, and a reduction in resource-related conflict. We have the data, we have the evidence. This is the power of nature-based solutions. They offer practical, community-rooted, peace-supporting approaches that work. So what is UNEP doing to support this? UNEP's leadership on NBS is grounded in its mandate, science, and on-the-ground delivery. UNEP Resolution 5.5 gave UNEP a clear mandate to define, guide, and support nature-based solutions. Our scientific authority, convening role, and field presence place us at the center of global efforts to advance peace-positive nature-based solutions with strong safeguards and community benefits. We're implementing this mandate through the EU-UNEP partnership and growing a global NBS portfolio, compiling best practices, supporting countries in design and evaluation, and helping unlock finance. Our Nature-Based Solutions for Peace report highlights over 40 cases worldwide showing how NBS reduced conflict risks and strengthened resilience. Two specific examples. In Abyei, on the border between Sudan and South Sudan, UNEP works with the United Nations Interim Security Force and peace partners to restore degraded lands and improve climate-resilient agriculture. By finding collaborative solutions to help divided communities manage shared resources and helping them find their own solutions, tensions are reduced in an area strained by displacement and climate shocks. In West Karnali, Nepal, I think we'll hear more about Nepal, today. UNEP and the EU supported livelihood diversification to move households from climate-vulnerable agriculture to multiple income sources. By the end of the work, 67% of the households had diversified and 95% had reported higher incomes, easing pressures that drive insecurity and outmigration. These are just some examples, and we'll hear more today, that show that NBS can deliver concrete peace dividends where climate and environmental stresses are highest. But we can do more, and we're ready to do more. Delivering NBS at scale is required to address today's interconnected crises. Some key enablers are needed to make NBS work. First, we need partnerships that cut across sectors in society. No one partner has all the skills, assets, perspectives, capacity that is demanded to deliver on NBS. We need a shared vision of solidarity, particularly in conflict contexts, and that has to be locally rooted. And we need shared accountability and metrics. Anyone who has worked in environment and development knows that real win-wins are not that easy. Trade-offs are inherent in the messy space of complex human and environmental systems. We need to be clear about what our goals are, what the co-benefits are, and also what trade-offs we are willing to make, and that has to be mediated in a socially equitable process. UNEP works with member states, regional bodies, financial institutions, and communities to advance NBS, to build resilience, reduce insecurity, and strengthen environmental governance writ large. We deeply value our long-standing partnership with the EU and its leadership on the climate security agenda. Through its joint communication, the EU has committed to 28 concrete actions, and the EU-UNEP partnership on climate, environment, peace, and security is putting this into practice in 15 different countries. Excellencies, colleagues, in a time of tight resources, NBS offer cost-effective solutions that address these multiple co-benefits and crises. Multilateral, national, and community partnerships are essential to realizing their potential. At a moment when crises are increasingly interconnected, so must our responses be. Let us continue to work together, and I look forward to hearing all the solutions about nature-based solutions from the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. I think it's quite clear that we've moved on from where nature-based solutions on climate peace and security were more theoretical to actually practice. And as Doreen said, we'll be looking forward to how this is being or is playing out on the ground. Thank you, Doreen, for that. Now it's my turn to invite to the podium Ms. Camila Zepeda. She is the head of International Affairs Unit at the Secretariat of Environment and Natural Resources of Mexico, who will be delivering her welcome remarks on behalf of the Secretary Alicia Bresciana.
Thank you very much. And I would say more than welcoming remarks is already talking about practice and what we can do. Because now security is not just talking about armed forces, but actually anticipating and advancing the adaptation that we need to do to climate risks. I mean, by now it has been recognized even by the World Economic Forum that on the next decade, this is going to threaten our populations heavily and that we need to start acting now. And so from Mexico, the first thing we did is to put it very high on the political agenda and already incorporate it in our newly updated NDC. For those who are not in the climate sphere, it's our national determined contribution. Right now at Belém COP30, we just updated it and launched it. And we saw that because in our region, and particularly in our country, we see that climate risks are exacerbating violence, but also organized crime. And so it is a very sensitive issue that is also advancing internal migration, and it's exacerbating all of the problems that you've already heard and don't need to repeat. But we see that we need to design policies for it. And for that, it needs to be at the core of our planning. So in our NDC, we have an adaptation component, and that we have now included a strategic pillar explicitly mentioning the linkages between climate change and security issues. So not only are we recognizing it, but we're saying we need to do something about it. It starts by data, for sure, and one of the ideas is to create a portal that we can bring all multi-stakeholder engagement, have academia, civil society, private sector, all levels of government, first of all, of identifying what are those risks, because we have different risks depending on the ecosystem, depending on the socioeconomic conditions, and so also identifying that there's a diversity. It's not just largeness conflicts, there's also very specific, even local conflicts. And so the data and understanding the communities and what the threats are important. So first having an information portal, but then doing something with that information, right? And so the idea is also to create policies specifically tailored for those communities. And we want to bring that to the political agenda and making sure that we are discussing not just in Mexico, but in one region. And we see that nature-based solutions actually is one of the ways forward on how to address it. And we do see that in our case, particularly watersheds and mangroves are playing a very important role, because in our region, we are facing intense hurricanes and intense floods. And we see, and there's a various of options, but mangroves, in our case, that's why I said it is specific to your ecosystem. We see that investing heavily not only helps us to reduce the threat when we have hurricanes, that they don't destroy all of our coast, but also protect our coral reefs and the ecosystem. That we have a very diverse marine ecosystem. And so we are protecting that, but also by creating social programs, by having ecosystem payments to protect these mangroves, we are working with the communities, we are talking to them, and we're making them part of the solution. And instead of them going for means of survival to the organized crime, we are providing jobs, we are providing opportunities to communities that are in vulnerable areas, in conflicted areas, and we are also creating incentives to come work for their community, right? And so this is one of the examples that has so many co-benefits, that it's a win-win situation for all, and that it's actually achievable, and it's sensible, and it makes perfect sense for the community to be involved in. And so this is just one of the solutions that we thought, but it's just the beginning, right? In our case, this is a topic that it's just started to get traction, and we hear more and more, hopefully, that more countries will acknowledge it and will put it in their planning, in the strategic federal planning. But then we need the implementation phase. In our case, this was just the plan. We have yet to start now the implementation phase, and this is where the EU UNEP partnership is much welcome. Mexico is part of this regional initiative. We're in the pilot phase, and we're keen on learning more and understanding more, because one of the things that we see key is that we need to talk to the communities. We need to tailor it. Unfortunately, this is not something that we can do at scale, and that's very challenging, because to get funding at local level, it's not easy. But we need to involve the communities, talk to them, and then understand what the dynamics are, and then make them part of the solution with all the providing funding. And so that's what we see this partnership very interesting, because it has that vision. It has that at its core. And we have yet to see what the next phase is. But here we're ready to take the work that is needed and make sure that we can provide some good examples. And maybe the next time we'll be here sharing with you now what are the results of that EU UNEP partnership. But very happy to be part of it. And if it helps, I can share. It's not translated into English. Our NDC is just in Spanish. But that component, I think, would be useful for other countries. We're working on translation. But the idea is to share best practices and make sure that we're all coming together with this same goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Camila for already sharing, what's or how Mexico is taking on bringing nature-based solutions to create co-benefits, not just on climate change adaptation, but also bringing social benefits and cohesion, but also how you've already moved forward in integrating nature-based solutions, but also climate peace and security into your NDCs. This is, I think, something that we can also learn from, because governments do, we put a lot of burden on the government where we want to have the policy on nature-based solution, then we want a policy on NDCs, and we want a policy on this, but where you're already integrating, I think this is something that we can all learn from. So we will now move to the panel discussions. Again, as I said before, this will draw largely on the EU UNEP partnership, collaboration on climate, environment, peace, and security, particularly on the importance of locally led, context-specific nature-based solutions that address climate risks while strengthening social cohesion and livelihoods. I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Deepak Janwal. He is a Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Forest and Environment of Nepal. Thank you. I would also like to invite Mr. Mohammed Kada, Environmental Governance Advisor, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Federal Republic of Somalia. Thank you. And also Dr. Ibrahim Abshria, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, advisor to the Libyan Presidency Council. If you could also join, please. Okay. Maybe I try to, I was hoping you'd sit on this side. We can break the gender, but please, you can.
With my colleagues, Africans.
Thank you. So I will be asking each of you to reflect a little bit on the overarching theme of nature-based solutions as a means of addressing climate peace and security, and how nature-based solutions can serve not only an environmental and climate tools, but also as drivers for peace and security. I would like to start with Mr. Deepak Janwal from Nepal. So my question is, Nepal has extensive experience with supporting communities in planning and implementing locally led nature-based solutions for adaptation. In fact, Nepal was one of the 2 countries in the world that actually piloted the approaches tested by the EU UNEP partnership, which is now expanded to 15 countries worldwide. So that's quite a great upscaling. Could you tell us a bit about this experience, and what lessons can Nepal share about designing and implementing community-based nature-based solutions that also strengthen social cohesion and resilience? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Celia. Respected Excellency, delegates and friends, good afternoon to all. Nature-based solution and ecosystem-based adaptation are the key cornerstone of Nepal's national climate framework, in particular our NDC and NEP. Nepal is advancing nature-based solution by encouraging ecosystem restoration and community stewardship at the heart of the climate strategy. The NDC comments maintaining at least 46% of the country under the forest cover, under sustainable forest management. These strategies and targets empowers local government and community forest user group to drive nature-based solution on the ground, reducing flood, landslide, and drought risks while safeguarding the biodiversity and livelihood. We aim at localizing implementation of such solutions by local adaptation plan, LAPA, municipal plan, community-based institution, which remains centered to bottom-up adaptation planning, guiding local stakeholders to identify ecosystem-based and community-based action aligned with NDC and UNEP process. Nepal was one of the 2 pilot countries in the first phase of EU-UNEP partnership. For us, this was an important opportunity to test how locally led adaptation, nature-based solution, and pre-bullying can reinforce each other in the real community. Now, I like to share our experience. The pilot project was focused on Karnali River basin, which is the one most of the climate vulnerable region in the country. The project was mainly focused in 2 key areas. First was the supporting community to design and implementing the nature-based solution. This includes the restoration, degraded land, improving the water system, establishing the river bank and slopes, and promoting the climate resilient agriculture. The second focus point was the strengthening the local community institutions so that community could manage natural resources with community forestry user groups, water user groups, disaster risk communities, women's cooperative. These groups carried out just risk assignment, identified sources of tension, and agreed on practical action to reduce both climate risks and local disputes. To establish this, in the village, the Karnali River basin, water becomes scarce every dry season. Rainfall patterns were shifting, and the old hand pumps could not no longer reach the water table. As the situation was worse, farmers found themselves disagreeing more often about how water should be shared, and this tension grew each year, especially in dry season. Those the EU-UNEP partnership, the community received support to repair the water system, new water points were installed, and local communities were created to manage resources fairly. Within the year, the disputes around water had almost disappeared, and people told us that relations in the neighbors had improved significantly. This is just one example. The result from the pilot project clearly mentioned livelihood and resilience improve, tension was decreased, and social coherence was strengthened, conflict was reduced, climate-driven displacement pressure went down. These results shows nature-based solution when led by community can powerful tool for the peace as well as adaptation. I also like to share some lesson we drew from experience. First, we need locally led planning during the work. What farmers will design, that plan is the practical for this nature-based solution. Second is governance is important. In this case, local communities' governance was legally right and community forestry was chosen as our working area. Third was the flexible in financing for innovation. If you target activity we determined earlier, before the plan, it will not work. It should be give the communities what they want and what they have demand. Therefore, budget should be flexible. Fourth is women's leadership. Most of the community are led by the women. These are the four major another lessons what we draw from this one of the pilot area. Nepal is now part phase for partnership along with Bangladesh and Pakistan in South Asia. To conclude, Nepal's experience shows that nature-based solution can be do far more than restore the ecosystem. They can improve livelihood, reduce tension, and make community more resilient to climate shocks. We are proud that the model was helped pilot is now being scaled to more countries, and we look forward to continue this partnership, both to learn and to be continued. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. So what I got was how you leveraged or invested in restoring forest cover, but also the community governance, bringing the forest users, the water users to find a solution. I think DRR community members as well, to address droughts, bring about biodiversity, but also improving livelihoods as well. So I will come back to you. I have more questions. I would like to hear a little bit more on that. But I will now move to the second question, which is to Somalia. Somalia continues to face significant climate-related pressures, including recurrent droughts, and challenges linked to population movement, so displacement, and natural resource management. Could you highlight any examples from ongoing environmental and climate resilience efforts in Somalia that demonstrate how investments in nature-based solutions can strengthen livelihoods, support sustainable resource management, and contribute to long-term stability?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank UNEP for organizing this event, but also inviting Somalia so that we can share Somalia's perspective. Thank you very much for that. I also acknowledge the presence of the EU ambassador, so thank you. Before I share examples from Somalia, I think in the interest of everyone, I would like to make a couple of points so that we understand also the context that we are talking about. I think Somalia is a classic example when it comes to environmental challenges that we have, as well as the impacts of climate change that the country is suffering. You mentioned droughts and floods, and it's true. Sometimes we have plenty of rain that causes flooding. Then in the next 3-4 years, we will have droughts. And that's causing, of course, displacement, destruction of livelihoods, and so on. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, if you restore land, if you restore watershed, what does that mean in Somalia? It's an investment in keeping people on their land so that they don't move to contested areas. So investment in nature-based solution is an investment in stability, given the fragile context that Somalia is. So I think that is a very important point that I would like to make. So coming back to the examples and the investments that is being implemented at the local level in Somalia, last year the Green Climate Fund approved a big project. I think one of the largest projects that the Green Climate Fund has endorsed it for an LDC or even a developing country, around 100 million, but the financing from GCF was around 79, almost 80. Together with the co-financing, it was around 100 million. That project is called Climate Resilience Agriculture in Somalia, and the focus of that project is mainly on restoring land, degraded land, rehabilitating water infrastructure so that access to water increases, locally led adaptation at the community level. So communities are also involved, and that project is being implemented across the country. So it's not actually limited to one region or one state, but all the federal member states of Somalia. So securing that financing from GCF was a big achievement. It was after the executive director of GCF, Mavalda, visited Somalia that push on accessing GCF resources for this kind of interventions were secured. So that project was launched at the beginning of this year, and the implementation has just started. So actually, the impact of that project from the local communities will be something to look at, in the coming years. It's a 7-year project, so it just started. And there is also another key project called JOSP, Jowhar Office Stream. UNEP is part of that. It's an interagency project, a big one, to restore an important reservoir along the Shabelle River. The Shabelle River, as you said, flooding, when there is plenty of rain in Ethiopia and Kenya, the river is caused flooding, and the infrastructure along the river, that important reservoir and other canals were destroyed in the last 3-4 decades due to the civil conflict in Somalia. So this project is very important to rehabilitate that area, the water infrastructure along the Shabelle River, and also enhance locally led adaptation and climate smart agriculture. So communities play a big role. The challenge we have now with that project is USAID was one of the big donors in that, and now they have pulled it back. So FCDO and the other donors are still there. So other funding sources are also being looked at. So that is also a key project that will really help restore degraded land as well as local adaptation to climate challenges. Another initiative that I can share you from Somalia is related to the Great Green Wall, the AFR 100, the African Union flagship for restoring degraded land and so on. Somalia became part of that. And to operationalize at the national level, what the country came up 2 years ago was an initiative called Green Somalia. So planting trees, reforestation, afforestation, restoring degraded land. And now we are moving toward this resource mobilization and getting projects to start that. So thanks to the Adaptation Fund, we have now the first project. It's called Hal Abur in Somali. So it's basically regreening as peace infrastructure involving local communities and restoring degraded land. So that is also another key initiative that is being implemented in Somalia. Apart from this big project is supported by donors and so on, I think an important point to highlight is also the role of local communities. So there are different local initiatives, local NGOs in support with local authorities and local communities. There are different smaller initiatives, but very impactful, that are happening throughout the country. So in terms of afforestation, reforestation, and restoration of degraded land, as well as water management, and so on. And that contributes to peace. You know, if communities, different clans, the issue we have in Somalia is this clan conflict is, and as resources become scarce, water becomes scarce, different clans are coming to maybe one water well. You know, managing that resource and involving different communities contributes also to dialogue and understanding between the local communities. And actually, that is being done mainly by local organizations, local NGOs, with support from international NGOs as well. So that's another key initiative. And lastly, the other example I can give you is, you know, the coastal ecosystem. Somalia, as you know, if you look at the geographic location of Somalia, the Indian Ocean, as well as the Gulf of Aden, one of the longest coasts in Africa. Recently, there was some data and research that was done on the mangrove. Mangrove is along the Somali coast, and that shows it is decreasing. Somali coastal communities and villages and towns along the coast are also facing, you know, sand dunes that's taking over their houses and so on. So some smaller initiatives are happening also to restore mangroves, stabilize the sand dunes and so on. So in Berbera, Kismayo, and along those coastal cities, some of those initiatives are happening. So the final point I would like to make is that given the magnitude of the challenges we have, given the governance issues, Somalia as a country emerging from a conflict, you know, the priority mainly of the government is, you know, fighting Al-Shabaab and, you know, mainly the military side of things and stabilization. But the resource it has, you know, goes mainly to that. And, you know, there is no domestic resource mobilization and revenue that can be directed to what it is. If there is anything, it's very small. And given now the donor landscape and the changes that are happening, as I said, USAID now pulling away from one of the key projects, that is having an impact. So the magnitude we have and the small interventions that are happening are not enough. But we thank also GCF, the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund, that are supporting now these bigger initiatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing the insights on Somalia. I think countries like Somalia, first of all, not only are they facing conflict, but they are also highly exposed to climate change. And because of these issues, then the access to resources to address these challenges is also a problem in itself. And as you were just saying, you know, the USAID pulling out. But I think we'll also be watching Somalia because it is one of the few sort of coming or emerging out of conflict countries where the Vertical Funds has invested quite a substantive amount of resources. So thank you so much for sharing, and also, of course, on the JOSP and the Great Green Wall. Now I'll turn to Libya, but I think you'll also be talking about on the Sahel as well. Across North Africa and the Sahel, environmental pressures, mobility, and instability overlap. How climate-related pressures are complicating transboundary relationships, and how classical conflict mediation can be adapted to these challenges. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And let me to send my thanks to the UNEP to give me this chance to speak by the name of Great Sahara. I think only one the voice here in this assembly who talking about the Great Sahara. Majority of you, I think, know the North Africa and Sub-Sahel, but there is no organization who care for Great Sahara. This is first. Secondly, let me to send my thanks to the HD Center, the Human Dialogue Center, who have experience in the mediation and quiet mediation between the people of Sahara. And we are very lucky with us now in this room, Madame Wagner, Christine. First of all, I don't representative Libyan government. I representative our people in the Great Sahara. When we're talking about the Great Sahara, we're talking about the space like the size of United States or Republic of China, about 10 million kilometers square. In the Great Sahara, we have ecosystem. We have animal, trees. There is another life in the night, different some areas. The question now, how we can to use NBS, National Peace System solution, to make peace in this huge area. As you know, for example, we have local sultanates. This is the local leaders. For example, in the north of Niger, in the region of Ayer, the capital Agadez, still we are working with the local sultan. He's still alive. I think his name Haj Omar Ibrahim. The local sultans has natural solutions to stop the war, to make peace between the people when the conflict on the water, trees, camel, boys, and others. And the Tibesti region, this is one region in the north of Chad. The size of Tibesti region, like the size of Germany, by the way, 350,000 kilometers. Even the region of Ayer in Niger, about 500 something, like Ukraine size. So we're talking about very important places. And the Darfur, for example, the tragedy what we are watching now, started in the 1916, when someone occupied the Sultanate of Darfur and destroying the system, the natural system of sultanates. How the sultanates make solution with the tribes, the conflicts between farmers, herders. So that's why in our recommendation to UNEP to how to restore the rule of the sultanates to make peace between our people there. In Kano, by the way, there is local sultan. He's named the Prince Muhammad Sanusi II. He was the head of central bank in Nigeria, by the way. But today, the Sultan of Kano, he's talking about environment, about water, about conflict between tribes. There is a new danger coming in the Great Sahara. It's illegally mining. This is what we are facing now. We understanding there is around international company need some mineral, but at the same time we call that companies to respect our environment. We know that we need some technology, AI, electronic cars, solar technology. We needed some mining in our area, but we call these companies to respect our environment. And we call the UNEP to put the new Bs for environmental justice. And as Sahara people, we discovered there is data gap between United Nations especially UNEP, and what happened a few years ago. So that's why we're working with non-government organization in the south of Libya, in Shinqit, the north of Mauritania, in the Niger, and we are recording very important information who attack our environment. When we are meeting now in this room, our people in Arlit, this is one city in the north of Niger, they are facing radiation of uranium in Arlit. So this voices, no anybody can to hear it. That's why we are today here, to hear the voices of our people there. So our recommendation to UNEP, and I overhand this recommendation to the lady, Cecilia, because we're back to Sahara and we are sleeping and feel the peace. There is lady to fight for us. So one of them, the gap of information, data gap. Secondly, how to restore the mechanism, the tools, the experience of local sultans. In Libya, we have one sultan of the tribe, very important tribe in the area, the Tubu. This is one tribe living in the south of Libya and the north of Niger and the Tibesti. This is the homeland in Tibesti. Now the new companies mining, maybe in this room we can't mention the names of companies. I know that it's very sensitive. Maybe in the closed room and in the mediation of HD censor we can't to mention the names. But ecosystem in the Tibesti facing big disaster. As you know, the Tibesti region as model, 100 years, no any nation can to occupation Tibesti. Now the multi-companies mining, destroying our life in Tibesti. So our nations send it our verses to you, how to support us in this critical situation. Thank you for hearing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have heard your cause. I'm probably too small to address all the challenges that you are facing in the region. But thank you so much for sharing and also reminding us that these issues are not just happening at the local level, but also transboundary. But also, as you're highlighting, it's not just dealing with the climate change and conflict issues, but we also have, in the case of the Sahel, the issue of critical mining and how that's actually creating more conflict and exacerbating the impact of climate change on the communities. Now, I have about an extra 5 minutes before we open the floor to the audience for questions. So if it's okay with you, I will ask follow-up questions because I thought that was quite interesting, the sharing from across the panel. My first question is actually to both Nepal and Somalia. It was really interesting because you are all emphasizing on the importance of nature-based solutions to address or to bring co-benefits on livelihoods, addressing climate change, but also the issue of tension and conflict. But both of you also stressed on the need for hard infrastructure. So you mentioned in the case of Nepal that you are not only looking at the forest issues, but also you're working at repairing water systems. And in Somalia, you also mentioned about, again, the coastal mangrove restoration. You talked about the JOSP, again, bringing nature-based solutions. But then you also talked about restoring the reservoir that was destroyed by the war. So is there a limit to nature-based solutions? Is it a combination of nature-based solutions together with a harder adaptation mechanism to bring or address the impacts of climate change and bring about peace? I'm just quite interested that you both mentioned the issue of infrastructure and restoration and repairing. And then the question I have for you is on, I wanted to hear a little bit more. You talked about how the sultans and the local leadership can be a clear mechanism of addressing some of the, or bringing forward some of the nature-based solutions for peace. But in a region like the Sahel, how then do you bring this leadership across the transboundary? So how does the leadership, the local leadership connect with the regional mechanisms of addressing climate change impacts and bringing about peace? So if you could address the question on
the... thank you for question. You are focusing how the structure or the nature-based solution focusing. Sorry. Okay, I will try to answer. In our case, we make the check dam in the river. Also, we focus the water. Then after, we also restore the community forestry on the river side. It is not only the plantation area, because when the water table is enhances, then some of the forest is automatically come naturally regenerated. Then ecological function of that ecosystem becomes alive, like earlier. Therefore, what we are stressing that nature-based, we are not focusing the big structure, nature-based solution like eco-engineering. Eco-engineering, natural regeneration, focusing in water are sufficient for the nature-based solution. These are not, this is the only one example. We have many other examples, many examples in the country. I would like to share, we have the good community forestry in Nepal. Many countries are now duplicating this idea. We have restored the forest. Previously, it was around the 37%. Now it becomes the 44% of the forest land. It's now the forest coverage by community managed forest. The second one is the, we have the doubling the tiger population, or they're doubled within the 10 years, we doubled our tiger population. See, this is another example of the nature-based solution. Naturally, we protect the forest, then it becomes the success. These are the my focus. And you also asked how the livelihood, the nature-based solution, and the peace are connected. You also asked that one. Where in this case, when water is access to the people, then they started to, the smart agriculture, like the growing the vegetables, fruits, those things. And also, when the forest area is access, then they can, many forest products like leaf litters, those things, they collect the making the forest powder. That is also another income source. They have the many income opportunity in individual household. There is also the good riverine forest, also the tourist side. Some people also earn from the, the ecotourism, also homestay. These are the very good example. Within very small contribution, every household, almost every household got the opportunity of life. When the income will come with the people, then it will happiness. It comes happiness. Then tension will be far. Therefore, tension and this, the nature-based solution is the interlinkage. Thank you.
So the way we see, or in my view, I see hard infrastructure and nature-based solutions. I think for Somalia, since everything was destroyed during the war, like I was saying, the reservoir, but also the other infrastructure along the river, even the urban infrastructure, I think restoring or rebuilding that infrastructure is indispensable. And so what we are doing now at the policy level, the country has developed its NDC 3.0 that was submitted to UNFCCC. It integrates climate peace and security as well as nature-based solutions, as the colleague from Mexico was saying as well. And we have also a national development plan. And for the first time, Somalia has a separate pillar on environment and climate resilience. Integrating climate and environment resilience across the development goals. So I think the way, when you look at those documents, then you see that, embedding nature-based solutions in the development goals, including peace and stability, is very key. So the development goals could be rebuilding an infrastructure, but within that, you are also restoring, a whole ecosystem. For example, the CHOSP, if you restore that reservoir, then you are restoring the biodiversity around it there. It could be fishing, it could be plantation, and so on. You are also providing communities with water for irrigation, household consumption. So that infrastructure will have core benefits. So that's, I think, it's very indispensable. And I think the most important point is, unlocking and aligning finance for development with nature-based solutions. If we can do that, I think, the impact will be felt by the communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Lady Cecilia. The philosophy of this meeting, we looking for action solutions, not just a theory. So I give you two experience. In 2016, there is fighting tribes in the area called in the north of Chad, Kornebugdi, because there is a new element come in the area. It was before the conflict is on the water, trees, but now there is gold, there is antimony, there is cobalt, and titanium, and others. As you know, in the Congo, 4 million people die because of cobalt. Now in the Tibesti, there is cobalt. So when the war in 2016, the president of Chad in that time, he called the Sultan of Tubu in the south of Libya, without visa, without anything, the natural life, the natural solutions come to stop the war in Kornebugdi. The Sultan of Tubu, he didn't have weapons, he didn't have money. Commitment, traditional, speak, respect with his nation. In 2023, in Miski, many tribes came from Sudan, Niger, south of Libya, Chad, fighting for gold in Miski. So the president of Chad, he called the Sultan from south of Libya to restore the wisdom. And by the way, the Tubu and Tibesti has constitution. It's old constitution, about 300. How the price of ear, how the price of eye, when you kill someone, the money, everything from A to Z. So this is the experience what we have. As non-government organization, we send the initiative of Aghdam's Dakar direction. We control our people. We control the culture, how to help them. And this is the rule of United Nations, UNEP, how to support this locally sultans, to make solution, how to make Fox and the Great Sahara isn't only the North Africa of Sub-Sahel, no. We're talking about space, 10 million kilometers square. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that insight. Again, I think let's appreciate our panel. And we will now move to the questions. I don't know if there's an extra, you have the mics. If there are any questions, also remember we also heard examples of how Mexico is also moving forward on nature-based solutions for adaptation and for peace as well. So if there are any questions, please. There's a hand there.
Thank you for UNEP and EU for organizing this side event. I'm Anne Tarvainen from WWF Finland, and this is very good and relevant topic, and it's actually relevant for us in the Europe as well. And coming from the Eastern Europe and Baltic Sea area, Baltic area, this is something what we discussed also there. But thank you for very good examples, and I would like to express my question to the panelists. I have been happy to follow the development achievements in Nepal for a long time, and maybe I dedicate my first question to you, is that you have excellent examples, and also the other, you pointed out good examples from Somalia and Libya as well. But how to scale up these very good pilot programs and small-scale solutions that we can really make a big difference with these, because sometimes we find the solutions like community forestry is the key, but how to really scale up in the magnitude what is needed in your countries. The second question is, do you have a dialogue and cooperation with military and Ministry of Defense in your country? Because as we really focus for securing peace and managing conflicts, it would be interesting item for them, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Runyara Romunondo. I am with your UNEP International Assistance. Thank you so much for sharing the experiences from the various contexts on nature-based solution. My question is, in your efforts to advance nature-based solutions, are you also taking into consideration the indigenous knowledge systems in the areas you're working in?
Thank you. My greatest appreciations to all the best practices that you have been sharing. I'm Silvia Petinicchio from Plastic Free Organization. It's a non-for-profit organization. And basically, I wanted to ask you the role of a non-for-profit organization in bridging the gap between institutions and actually local communities. If you can actually share some advice, because we are actually there to help bridge this gap and involve local communities and local populations. Thank you.
Let's try to answer the 4 questions we've received, and then we'll do another call. There's a question to Nepal, but I think also to maybe all of you. How nature-based solutions, great examples, what's working, how do we scale up at a national level or beyond? And then there's a question on, are we having any dialogue with the military? We're talking about peace and security. And sometimes as climate or environmentalists, we stay in our own little silos. How are we actually breaking the silos to make sure that we're having a dialogue with the military? And then how are we using or leveraging indigenous knowledge? And then the question also about, is there a role or how can the nonprofit organization what it could be the bridge to also support the communities as well? I don't know who, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think these are very relevant questions. So scaling up, I think a number of things need to be done. This is just from my experience in Somalia. I think number one is the policy and regulatory framework. As I was saying, nature-based solutions, climate peace and security, if those are not reflected in the national policies, in the NDC, in the National Adaptation Plan, then it will be an issue. But if that is integrated into the national policy and regulatory frameworks, I think that is that's one of the points that can help us, scale up the nature-based solutions. Another point is also, deepening a relationship is, at different levels. So you start with the local communities, you have the regions, the national level, but as well as regional and international level. So from finance, you need international support. To reach the communities, you need local organizations. And of course, as well as horizontally, for example, in Somalia, the different federal member states, but also vertically from federal to national level. And another point that could help us scale up is the capacity. So from Somalia's experience, if a country or if the institutions don't have the capacity to for example, monitor, govern nature-based solutions, then it will be an issue. For example, if I was talking about infrastructure, if a riverbank is rehabilitated, but the institutions are not there, the security institutions, the other institutions to manage, and at the end of the day, what happens in Somalia is that maybe Al-Shabaab comes and they break again that riverbank. Might be a local...
Reply to 3 of the questions, because we do have good examples. On the approaching in our case,
not doing so good. So if it's okay with you, I will conclude the panel. That really you also need to start integrating nature-based solutions into your policy making. And the policy also goes beyond just the policy making, but also to the governance. The question about how do you bring the relevant decision makers, the ministries of planning, the ministries of interior, and so on and so forth, is part of the solution, breaking the silos essentially. Community engagement, indigenous knowledge, local knowledge. You talked a lot about the Sultan and the power that they have to actually stop the conflict is something that we also should be keeping in our minds as we are looking at how do we leverage nature-based solutions for peace and adaptation. There was also the issue of, I think, the limits of nature-based solutions that in some cases like Somalia, some cases in your case and also in Nepal, I think you use the word eco-engineering. It's not just about leveraging nature itself, but how do we bring the hard engineering together with nature, again, as a means of providing livelihoods, as a means of bringing peace, but also dealing with the climate change adaptation challenges. Thank you so much for taking time to share your experiences and lessons from and of course also Mexico, for sharing experiences. We will now move to the closing session, and if it's okay with you, we would like now to invite, sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm following my protocol here. I would like to invite Her Excellency Henrietta Geija. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly. This is the European Union Ambassador to Kenya to share her reflections. And this will be followed by Miss Susan Gardner, who's just joined us. She is the director of UNEP's Ecosystem Division. Thank you, Henrietta. Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy that I was here for the entire panel. I was supposed to come only at the end, and I was so sorry that I sat through it because it was extremely interesting what we discussed this afternoon. And I think the question that we posed each other this afternoon is of centrality for our future, the whole planetary future. And we have not discussed this enough. We have hardly scratched the surface. And you see from the different regions in the world how we share all the same challenges. I'm very happy that the European Union is contributing to try to find nature-based solutions to tackle these problems. But I heard the question that always comes up about scaling up, and I would say donor funding is not sustainable, full stop. By its very nature, it's not sustainable. It cannot be sustainable. So the only thing that works is if you start something with donor funding and you find a mechanism that will generate income over time to the communities. And the EU has made a couple of pilots in that, and maybe the biggest one here in Africa is the Virunga National Park. Maybe you heard about that. The Virunga National Park is UNESCO heritage, and it's slash in the middle between DRC, Rwanda, and Congo, and Uganda. So you can imagine what that means, a very highly conflictive border area. And this Virunga National Park has served as an island of peace by conserving the nature there as a park and creating a ring around it for the communities, which produces income, park-related income. So I think, and I have seen that so many times, this is the only solution. Of course, the EU was pumping money into Virunga for many years, but increasingly the communities are getting money from it. Or an example that we have here in Kenya, Northern Rangeland Trust. Maybe some of you know that. In the northern area of Kenya, this is a desertic area, a sal area. And climate change is exacerbating the problems we have there. So the drought flood cycle, population livestock growth is putting increasing pressure on resources, especially water resources. And the traditional lifestyles are no longer sustainable. So armed conflict between clans, tribes over water, scarce resources, cattle rustling, but also over the porous border from Somalia, Al-Shabaab, radicalization. So NRT, the Northern Rangeland Trust, is a community-based project working with community land and with communities to produce alternative livelihoods. And they are the ones who have created the best carbon credit scheme here in Kenya, maybe even in the whole of Africa. What does this do? What does it do? It brings financial resources to the community, and the community decides how to spend it. So that's what I think should happen for sustainability, because at one point, any project, any program has an end, and then what? And we have seen too many times, as soon as the money is gone, everything falls back to square one. So I think the other point I was picking up today is the sustainability through cultural traditions. This is so important. That's why we have to start from the communities. our idea of planning, including the EU's planning, is top-down. So we sit at the desk, we brainstorm, and then we say, oh, this we could do, this we could do. But we have to invert it. We have to start from the communities. And there are already global networks. I just talk about the eco-villages. You may have heard of the global network of eco-villages. And these are communities that have decided to go a different way, to use nature to fight climate and to avoid conflict in fragile areas. And they help each other, not only with technical assistance, but also with financial resources. And I do think the future and the solutions are community-based and very deeply rooted in the cultural traditions. Only if they're culturally rooted can they be sustainable. So I have seen in my career many nature-based solutions, so Virunga is only one of them. But for example, in Guyana, we as EU, we were pumping millions and millions in a seawall made out of concrete because Guyana is below the sea level. And that created many problems over land conflicts because the land was flooded. This was completely unsustainable because every meter of seawall cost a fortune. What we did, we changed to mangrove forests. This did the trick. You go to Guyana, now you will see. And it produces income to the community, especially women. So, because they are the carers of the forest. So, I have seen many of those examples. And I also wanted to stress what was mentioned here, the cross-border nature. Cross-border nature of conflicts. This is so important, and we have realized that when you try to do nature-based programs in border areas and communities work together, because many times our borders are artificial borders. So the communities and the cultures on either side, they relate to each other. So if you can bring them together and find something that works for the community, you can make out of a zone of insecurity a zone of prosperity. So I have many things here, and I will not say the usual from the institutional. And I would like to say here also that far too often I see national governments not working with the local level. Grave mistake, fundamental mistake, because that kills all sustainability. So my plea here is not only the EU, but all levels, donors, governments, we have to look at the communities because this is the future. And you may say, okay, a community here and there. But if you put it all together, that is the change. And communities inspire each other. For example, in what I said about the Northern Rangeland Trust in Kenya, this model has spread like wildfire because communities see, oh, there's something that works. I want to do this as well. So that learning is happening, and we just have to start and nurture that movement. So thank you very much for this inspiring afternoon. It will keep me thinking, and I will try to do my best to incorporate it into my work. Thank you very much. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Ambassador. Excellencies, it's such a pleasure to contribute some remarks in the closing of this really critical event. Particularly talking about nature-based solutions and peace is a conversation about hope. And as the ambassador said, we're sharing some of the same challenges, and there are secrets to sustainability that we're learning over and over again, connecting to livelihoods with peace, particularly for women, especially with local communities. And Joint Secretary, if you allow me, I'd love to share an example to sort of leave with a story of hope from Nepal, where the focus is on people, as you said, in local communities, engaging communities. This is a story about a mother who lives with her 3 children in West Karnali. Is that right? Nepal. And this is a dry, mountainous region that has a real struggle for farming. Now, we're going to call this mother, for the sake of the story, we'll name her Maya. And Maya grows millet and rice and beans on a small plot of land, while her husband, like half of the men from her village, work far away in India. And even to make things more complex, because of climate change, the monsoon rains are more erratic, to the extent that they've washed away her stores of grain, which was her family's only source of income. And this is the story you see across the globe in situations like this that we'll see more and more with climate change, as the family falls into debt, and then at the same time there's increased competition for water in the village, and all of this leads to more local conflicts. And there's an associated rise in gender-related violence. But I promised you a story of hope, because things changed. And this story of change was part of when Maya decided to join the UNEP EU training course that helped farmers to start small, non-agricultural related businesses, making them less dependent on the situation and the environment with climate change. And so Maya, with her new skills and newfound confidence, she opened a tiny restaurant, and on that first day, that restaurant made a profit. And her business now provides a steady income for her children. It means her children go to school. It means her husband actually could afford to return. So peace for Maya began with the chance to rebuild her life, and her story shows how nature-based solutions can ease that pressure and create that stability. Access to hope. Gesundheit. UNEP has seen this in many fragile regions, from watersheds to rangelands to coastal areas. For example, in Haiti, communities are restoring mangroves, like the story we heard from the ambassador, stabilizing riverbanks, learning aquaculture, learning beekeeping, skills that can be used for income generation. These efforts restore the land. They create new sources of income, and they help families remain in their communities. So nature-based solutions address the causes of fragility, the competition for land, the loss of livelihoods, that erosion of hope. And it can turn that scarcity into a shared purpose, so that it opens up new pathways for prosperity, generating millions of decent jobs, giving young people alternatives to migration and conflict. But it's important, as we heard from the ambassador, for these solutions to last, they have to be financed and they have to be inclusive. Indigenous peoples have to have access to the decisions. They manage and protect the ecosystems. They have experience for generations and millennia. It's their knowledge and their connection to the land that must guide how we restore it. And women, too, in particular, they're leading efforts to manage resources and to hold communities together. And we know too often their voices are absent from decision-making. But when women are part of the process, the solutions take hold. And much of UNEP's work in this field has been possible because of this long-standing partnership with the European Union. We're very grateful to To work together, we've tested and expanded approaches that link climate adaptation and peace building, like this pilot project that supported Maya's community. And now it's in its second phase, reaching 15 countries across 7 regions, supporting 31 projects that use nature to foster resilience and stability. It's one of the most comprehensive global efforts to connect climate, environment, and peace on the ground. And we are deeply grateful for the EU's trust and support and partnership in this. As we look ahead, there is one truth that stands out. When nature thrives, communities thrive, and peace becomes possible. And UNEP stands ready to work closely with the EU and with all of you here as partners today to bring these solutions to scale. Because it's every investment in nature that can also be an investment in peace if it's done with the people who live closest to the land. And that's Maya's story. It's not unique. It's a story of resilience, and it's a story of the lives of so many communities with healthy nature. And when people are given the tools and the trust, they find their way to peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, and thank you so much, Susan. But also, thank you so much to our panelists and for all of you for staying until the end. They are here. I think there was still a few more questions if you want to ask. So please use that time. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. Nature-based solutions do work, as we heard today. It's how we integrate in terms of financing. The stories, I had forgotten that story actually. So thank you so much for reminding me. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.